My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 34 years old. 6 days after we buried my mother, my brother changed the locks on the house I grew up in and left my daughter's things outside in the rain. Lily's sneakers were soaked through. Her backpack was tipped over, half open, her drawings bleeding into the wet wood of the porch. And Ryan stood in the doorway.
Calm. Certain.
Like none of this was wrong. He looked at me the way you look at someone who does not belong anymore. The house stays with the Carter son, he said.
No hesitation. No emotion.
Just a rule he had repeated his entire life, like it was law. I stood there holding my car keys, trying to process how quickly everything had changed. 6 days ago, this was still my mother's home. Now I was being told I was nothing here. You should have learned that a long time ago, he added. Lily stepped closer to me, her small hand slipping into mine. She did not say anything. She just looked up at me, waiting for an answer I did not have yet. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, already done with the conversation. I need you gone by Friday, he said. Actually, sooner is better. Then he said the one thing that stayed with me. The one line that replayed in my head long after we drove away. I hope you enjoy being homeless, Evelyn. He closed the door after that.
Just like that. No argument.
No discussion. Just a final decision. But what Ryan did not know was that my father had left one final condition in his will. And when that condition was read out loud, everything he believed about this family was about to fall apart. I grew up in a small town called Ashford, Kentucky. Population just under 9,000. The kind of place where people know your last name before they know your first. And in that town, the Carter name meant something. My grandfather built half the homes on Maple Street. My father ran Carter Woodworks for over 30 years. People respected him, trusted him. But inside our house, there was a rule. Not written down, not debated, just understood. The son stays. The daughter leaves. Ryan was 6 years older than me, and from the time he could hold a hammer, he was treated like the future of everything. After school, he went to the shop with Dad. Learned how to cut wood, read measurements, handle clients. I went home with Mom, helped cook dinner, cleaned up, stayed quiet. At family gatherings, the conversations were always the same. Ryan talked about expansion plans, new equipment, ideas for the business. Dad listened, nodded, asked questions. When I tried to speak, it was different. That's nice, Evelyn, he would say. Pass the potatoes. It was not cruel in the loud, obvious way.
It was quieter than that.
More permanent. Like being included just enough to feel it, but never enough to matter. There was one phrase my father repeated every year, every holiday, every time someone mentioned the future. The land stays with the sun. He said it the way people talk about the weather, like it was just how things worked. When I was 15, I asked him if I could work at the shop on Saturdays. He did not even look up from what he was doing. What for? He said. I remember standing there, waiting for him to explain. Waiting for anything that made sense. You're not staying, he added. That was it.
No argument. No anger.
Just a simple fact in his mind. And in that moment, I understood something I would carry with me for years. In my own family, I was already considered temporary. I left Ashford the week after I turned 18. No big goodbye.
No emotional send-off.
Just a duffel bag, a used car, and enough cash to get me through the first month if I was careful. My father handed me a carpenter's pencil before I left. Flat, worn, the kind he kept behind his ear at the shop.
For when you need it, he said.
It was the closest thing to approval I ever got from him. I drove 3 hours west to Lexington and started over. I worked 2 jobs my first year. Day shifts at a small accounting office. Night shifts at a grocery store. Weekends were for studying. I chose forensic accounting because it made sense to me. Numbers always had. Numbers didn't care who you were. They didn't pick favorites. They didn't decide your worth before you had a chance to prove it. If something didn't add up, you could find out why. That idea stayed with me.
By 20.
For I was working full-time at a firm handling fraud cases. Small at first, then bigger, then cases that actually made the news. By 28, I started my own firm. It began in a rented office above a sandwich shop. 1 desk, 2 chairs, a second-hand printer that jammed every other day. I hired my first employee 6 months later. Then another. 3 years after that, we had over 20 people. Clients across multiple states. Contracts I never would have imagined when I was sitting in my childhood kitchen being told to stay quiet. And through all of it, my family never really knew. Or maybe they just never asked. When I came home for holidays, Ryan talked about the shop. Dad leaned in, interested, engaged,
Proud.
when I mentioned work, it lasted maybe 10 seconds. That's good, he would say. As long as you're doing something steady. Something steady. Like everything I had built was just a temporary phase before my real life started. After a while, I stopped explaining. I stopped trying to translate my world into something they would understand. Because the truth was simple. They had already decided who I was. And nothing I said was going to change that. My father died on a Tuesday morning. Heart attack. Sudden. No warning. He was at the shop when it happened, working like he always did. By the time anyone found him, it was already over. I got the call while I was at my office in Lexington. I remember staring at my phone for a few seconds after it ended, like if I didn't move, it might not be real yet. But it was. I drove back to Ashford that same afternoon. When I got there, the house was already full. Neighbors, old friends, people who had known my father for decades. And right in the middle of it all was Ryan, standing in the living room, shaking hands, accepting condolences. He looked prepared, like he had been waiting for this role his whole life. The grieving son, the one everyone turned to. I didn't say anything about it. There were too many things that needed to be handled. The funeral arrangements, the paperwork, the phone calls, the details no one else wanted to deal with. So I did what I had always done. I filled the gap. The service was held. 3 days later, Ryan gave the speech. He talked about legacy, about responsibility, about what it meant to carry the Carter name forward. People nodded. Some even wiped away tears. I stood in the back listening. He mentioned the business. He mentioned the house. He mentioned everything that could be passed down. He did not mention me. Not once. After the service, as people began to leave, a man approached me near the door. Mid-60s. Gray suit. Calm. Measured presence. "Evelyn," he said quietly. "I'm Daniel Brooks, your father's attorney." I nodded. I knew who he was. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You may want to stay in town a little longer," he said. "Your father made some changes before he passed." I felt something tighten in my chest. "What kind of changes?" I asked. He paused for a second. "The kind that need to be read with both of you present," he said. Then he gave a small nod and walked away. And just like that, for the first time since I came back to Ashford, something didn't feel settled. 6 days after the funeral, Ryan called me.
No greeting.
No small talk. Just straight to the point. "I need you out by Friday," he said. I was standing in the kitchen at the time, making breakfast for Lily. For a second I thought I heard him wrong. "Out of where?" I asked. "The house," he said. "I'm moving forward with renovations. I need the space cleared." I looked around the kitchen. The same cabinets my mother had used for years. The same window over the sink where she used to stand every morning. "We haven't even had the will reading yet," I said. "There's nothing to read," Ryan replied. "You know how this works." There it was again. The rule. The house stays with the son. I felt my grip tighten on the edge of the counter. "I'm not leaving until everything is official," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he let out a short laugh. "Then you'll leave with nothing," he said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to.
But he wasn't finished.
"I hope you understand something," he added. "This isn't your home anymore." And then, like he had rehearsed it, he said the line that would stay with me. "I hope you enjoy being homeless, Evelyn." The call ended. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone. Lily was sitting at the table, watching me carefully. Kids notice everything, even when they don't fully understand it. That evening, when we got back to the house, I already knew something was wrong. The front door didn't open. The key turned halfway, then stopped. I tried again. Same result. Ryan had already changed the locks. I walked around to the back. That's when I saw the boxes. 3 of them. Sitting on the porch. Lily's clothes. My suitcase. A few things from my mother's kitchen. All of it stacked together like it had been packed in a hurry. And the rain had already started. Lily's sneakers were soaked. Her drawings were smudged. The edges of everything were curling from the water. The front door opened behind me. Ryan stood there, like he had been waiting.
No επάλεγει. No hesitation.
Just certainty. You should have left when I told you to, he said. And in that moment, I realized he truly believed I had nothing left to stand on. That night, we stayed at a roadside motel just outside of town. 2 beds. A small table. A window facing the parking lot. Lily thought it was an adventure. She bounced on the mattress and asked if we could order pizza. I said yes, because I didn't trust my voice enough to say anything else. After she fell asleep, I sat at the edge of the bed and stared at the only thing my father had left me. A green metal toolbox. Ryan had handed it over earlier that day, without hesitation. Take it, he said. It's yours. Just tools. Just tools. I set the box on the bed and opened it slowly. Inside were the things you would expect. A small plane, a measuring gauge, a few worn hand tools that still carried the faint scent of sawdust and oil. But underneath them, there were 3 items placed carefully against the bottom. The first was a carpenter's pencil, flat, recently sharpened, and on the side, carved lightly into the wood, were my initials.
Itchy.
For a moment, I just stared at it. My father had never done anything like that before. The second item was a small brass key, older than the one I carried.
Heavier.
Different shape.
There was a tag attached to it.
Boathouse. I turned it over in my hand, trying to understand. The boathouse sat on the land behind the property. 18 acres stretching down toward the river. The place I used to go as a kid. The place Lily had only seen a few times but already loved. And then I saw the third item. A folded document. I opened it carefully. It was a financial notice. A second mortgage. Issued 3 years ago. Amount $340,000. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just paperwork. This was proof. Proof that the house Ryan had just thrown me out of wasn't as secure as he believed. And for the first time since everything started, I realized there was more to this story than what he wanted me to see. The next morning, I called Daniel Brooks. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd reach out, he said. I didn't waste time. There's a second mortgage on the house, I said. $340,000. Did my father know about this? There was a brief pause. Yes, he said.
He did.
I leaned back in the chair, trying to process that. He took it on to cover your brother's debts, Brooks continued. Ryan made some risky decisions with property investments. Your father stepped in to prevent things from collapsing. I looked down at the document in my hand. So the house isn't really his, I said. It's not as simple as he believes, Brooks replied. That sounded like an understatement. And the land? I asked. The 18 acres behind the house? Another pause. Longer this time. That, he said carefully, is where things get interesting. I sat up. Your father separated that parcel from the main estate before he passed, he explained. It is not included in the automatic transfer to your brother. I felt my grip tighten around the phone. Then who does it go to? I asked. That depends, Brooks said. On what? On a condition. The word landed heavier than I expected. What kind of condition? The kind that requires both you and your brother to prove something, he said. I didn't say anything. I just waited. A verified financial statement, he continued. Prepared by an independent CPA. Full disclosure of assets, liabilities, net worth. I let out a slow breath. And then the land goes to whoever can demonstrate the ability to hold it without debt.
No loans. No leverí.
No risk of losing it. I stared out the motel window. So this isn't about who stayed, I said quietly.
No, Brooks replied.
It's about who can actually keep it. For the first time since Ryan closed that door in my face, I felt something shift. Not hope. Not yet. But clarity. And sometimes, that is where everything begins. The reading was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10. Daniel Brooks's office sat on Main Street, second floor, quiet and formal. The kind of place where every word feels important the moment you sit down. Ryan arrived first. Dark suit, confident posture, the kind of expression that said he already knew how this would end. He didn't look at me when I walked in. He didn't need to. In his mind, this was already settled. A few minutes later, Brooks entered the room carrying 2 folders. He sat at the head of the table and adjusted his glasses. "We'll begin with the primary estate," he said. Ryan leaned back in his chair, relaxed, almost bored. The will was read line by line. The house on Maple Street, the workshop, the remaining assets tied to the family business. All of it went to Ryan. He nodded slowly as each item was confirmed. Not surprised, not emotional, just satisfied. When it ended, he finally looked at me. "This didn't have to be difficult," he said.
I didn't respond.
Because Brooks hadn't finished. He closed the first folder and placed his hand on the second. "There is one final section," he said. Ryan frowned slightly. "What section?" Brooks opened the document. 18 acres of riverfront land, including the boathouse, he read. Appraised at approximately $1.1 million. Ryan straightened in his chair. "That's part of the estate," he said. "It comes with the house." Brooks shook his head. "It does not," he said calmly. The room shifted. "That parcel has been separated and assigned under a conditional bequest." Ryan's expression changed for the first time. "What condition?" he asked. Brooks looked down at the page, then read directly from it.
"The
land shall pass to the child who demonstrates the financial ability to hold it free of debt for a minimum of 10 years. Silence filled the room. Ryan let out a short laugh. "That's fine," he said. "I already submitted my statement."
I'm aware, Brooks replied.
He opened the first envelope. Ryan Carter, he read. Assets were listed first. House value, business property,
Personal accounts.
Then came the liabilities. Second mortgage, business debt, outstanding loans. The numbers kept building. Ryan's jaw tightened. Net worth, Brooks said. Negative $41,000. The words didn't land right away. Like the room needed a second to catch up. Ryan leaned forward. That's temporary, he said quickly. The business is recovering. That doesn't reflect. It reflects your current position, Brooks said. Then he opened the second envelope. Evelyn Carter, he read. He listed the assets one by one. Business equity, investments, real estate, cash reserves. No debt, not a single liability. He paused before the final line. Net worth, $5,830,000. The room went completely still. Ryan stared at me. Not angry, not confident, just confused. Like he was seeing me for the first time. Brooks closed the folder. Based on the condition outlined in the will, he said, Evelyn Carter is the sole qualifying beneficiary of the 18-acre property. No one spoke. No one moved. And in that silence, everything Ryan believed about this family finally collapsed. No one spoke for a few seconds after that. Not Ryan, not Brooks, not even me. It was the kind of silence that only happens when something undeniable has just been said out loud. Ryan leaned back slowly in his chair, like the strength had gone out of him. $5 million, he said under his breath. He wasn't looking at Brooks anymore.
He was looking at me.
You knew, he said. You sat there and knew this whole time. I met his eyes. I knew what I built, I said. I didn't know it would matter here until recently. He shook his head like he was trying to reject the reality in front of him. You let me believe, he started then stopped. I didn't answer that, because the truth was simple. I didn't make him believe anything.
He chose not to see me.
Brooks gathered the papers neatly in front of him. The property will be transferred within 30 days, he said. All legal documentation will be finalized through my office. Ryan let out a short, hollow laugh. So that's it, he said. She just walks away with everything?
No, Brooks replied calmly.
She walks away with the only asset that meets the condition your father set. That landed harder than anything else. Not everything, just the part that required responsibility. Ryan looked down at his hands. For the first time in his life, There was no argument he could make, no rule he could repeat, no tradition he could hide behind. Just numbers.
Clear.
Unbiased. Final. I stood up slowly. Not to celebrate. Not to prove anything. Just because there was nothing left to say in that room. As I reached for my bag, I felt the small brass key inside. The one labeled boathouse. The one my father had left for me. And for the first time since all of this started, I understood exactly what he had been trying to do. 3 months later, I drove back to the property. Not the house on Maple Street. That place was no longer mine and, honestly, it never really had been. I drove past it without stopping. The windows were dark. A notice posted near the front door. The bank had already taken steps to reclaim it. Ryan was gone. I didn't slow down. I kept driving until the road narrowed and the trees began to close in. The entrance to the back acreage looked exactly the same. Gravel path. Overgrown edges. Quiet. Untouched. I parked near the old gate and stepped out of the car. Lily ran ahead of me, excited, like she remembered every detail even though she had only been there a few times before. "The river is this way, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "It is." I followed her down the path, the sound of water getting louder with every step. The boathouse came into view slowly. Worn wood, faded paint, exactly the way I remembered it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the brass key. For a second, I just stood there, holding it. 17 years ago, my father had given this to me, and I had spent all that time thinking it belonged to something else. I stepped forward and slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, like it had been waiting. The door opened with a soft creak. Inside, everything was still there. Fishing rods, a small chair, a shelf with old tools and supplies. Nothing fancy, nothing valuable in the usual sense, but it felt solid, real. Lily ran to the edge of the water, picking up small stones and throwing them in one by one. I sat on the wooden step and watched her. For the first time in weeks, everything felt quiet again. Not empty, just steady. And I realized something I wish I had understood years ago. Home isn't the place someone lets you stay. It's the place you're strong enough to keep. I used to think this story was about losing something. Losing a house. Losing a place I grew up in. Losing a role in a family that never really saw me the way I hoped they would. But that's not what it was. It was about understanding something I should have seen a long time ago. Your value is not decided by who includes you or who overlooks you. It is not measured by tradition or expectations or someone else's idea of what you're supposed to be. It is built quietly, over time, in the choices you make, in the work you do when no one is watching, in the things you carry on your own. My brother believed the house made him important, but when everything was put on paper, it wasn't the house that mattered. It was who could actually hold on to something without losing it. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone has ever told you that you weren't enough, or that your place didn't matter, let that be their mistake, not your limit. Build something they can't take from you. And when the moment comes, let the truth speak for itself. If this story meant something to you, take a second to share where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you stay with us for the next one.